if we don't create environments and places for people to come where they belong to something that matters, that they feel safe, they feel connected, they feel aligned, then people will start to look elsewhere, because there's so many opportunities and examples of organizations where they can go and get it. And I think people want that just as much as they do all of those other things that come with a career.
Hello, and welcome back to the latest episode of Making It Happen by Sims. My name is Mel, and in this episode, we will be discussing the importance of culture alignment in business in 2023 and beyond. I'm thrilled to be speaking with our dear colleague and friend of Sims, Luke Hall at Revolve. Welcome.
Hey Mel, thanks for having me on. I'm super excited. I was very honoured to be asked to join you on this one and all things culture, as we'll be talking about. And I think it's going to be a great conversation.
Brilliant, and we are very pleased to have you. So for those that may not know, so if you can just please introduce yourself and tell us a little about what you do.
So Luke Hall, I'm a managing director of an organisation called Revolve. We specialise in leadership and people development, supporting organisations in their growth, be it through creating cultural alignment and developing the people throughout the organisation in many different skills, as I say, from leadership and management skills to those personal skills everybody needs on a day-to-day basis. Had the pleasure of doing that for many, many years now, or in lots of different industries and sectors all over the world. And we love it. We love what we do every single day. And Sims is part of that. We've been working with you for well over a decade now. And you all are part of our journey. So I'm so pleased I get to be part of this conversation with you, because I think there's a lot of things we'll be discussing that link back to what Sims is and what a brilliant organisation is.
Oh, well, thank you. And absolutely, I think partnership has been key to that. So, sure. So let's get into it then. So what exactly is cultural alignment, and why is it important in today's business, and has it changed in recent years?
I think I'll start that back to front. Yeah, it has changed, and we can pick up on some of those things. For me, cultural alignment is about everybody throughout the organisation belonging to something that truly matters. And in order to understand what they belong to, it's about everybody being aligned to its purpose, where it's going, what it's trying to achieve, what it delivers for its customers, how they play a part in doing that. And I think how's a critical piece. It's about everybody understanding what's expected of them, and about what they can expect from the people around them. It's about everybody moving in the same direction, aligned to its purpose. And I think the term belonging is a huge part of how people can almost start to recognize it throughout their business. More so than ever, I believe, in this day and age, people do look way beyond just the paycheck, just the job, just the promotions and climbing the ladder. Yeah. People genuinely want to do something that matters, and they want to belong to something that does. And I think that's where alignment needs to be created. In terms of how has it changed over the years? Well, it's become more prevalent. It's become more of a requirement. People have more choice. Yes. We have learned so much about ourselves as individuals over the past 3 or 4 years on a global scale that people realize that choice is there. They don't have to be bound by the same organization, the lifers that sometimes stay in an organization for years. Yeah. Due to an obligation. It's, well, no, there's great businesses out there, there's great opportunities. And therefore, if we don't create environments and places for people to come where they belong to something that matters, that they feel safe, they feel connected, they feel aligned, then people will start to look elsewhere, because there's so many opportunities and examples of organizations where they can go and get it. And I think people want that just as much as they do all of those other things that come with a career.
Yeah, and that's really true. I mean, let's face it, that phrase of safe, I think in recent years, that's something that hasn't felt that, the world has been a strange place. So to almost have a constant and feel that within your workplace that you are sort of you are needed and that you are part of something bigger. I think that definitely helps, that you make sure that that you're part of something that's bigger than just, like you say, the money that perhaps a business is making. So yeah, brilliant. So how do you define organisational culture, and what are some of the key elements to make a strong culture?
That is such a huge question. I'm actually going to start with a definition that I saw online, probably one of my favorite things that I've seen throughout my career. It's by a lady called Jack Phillips, an expert in leadership and people development, speaker, author. And she said that culture is your employees' stomachs, how your employees' stomachs feel about Monday morning on a Sunday night. So it's all about how people feel, and that to me struck a chord, because I've had many times in my career where a Sunday has been a night of peril because I'm not looking forward to a Monday morning, and that's having then taken over my own organisation. I've experienced and pursued so many challenges over the last 3 years that I never would have imagined that I'd have been put in front of me. But yeah, I got up on a Monday morning excited, because not just because it was my business, but because of the people I work with, because of the clients that we work with, because of the way that we do things. So in terms of defining the culture, I think it's unique to every individual business. Yeah. It's unique to how they want to set their people up. But for me, the definition has to come down to how your people feel, and that summary of how your people's stomachs feel on a Sunday night about a Monday morning, to me, just gave me so many feelings of the past where I know that that's not been a good representation. So the definition is, it does come down to what you set your people up with. And also, if you look at the success of culture, if you've defined it well, it's about the inputs. It's about not what the business delivers. It's about all of those things that we discussed at the start, the environment that we create. So how is that defined within your business? The way that your people engage with one another. I think one of the great things that we've worked on recently with Sims and really stood out for me is that you've got something called Performing at Sims, and that is made of 4 pillars. Those pillars go from the definition of success individually for each person. Then you've got the behaviors of the pillar 2, the leadership culture and behaviors that we've created. 3 is around job role. So how do all those 3 things connect? But most importantly, and this was the bit that I thought was absolutely inspired about Sims, is part 4 was Team Sims. And that, again, is a great example of defining culture, is that in order to perform at Sims, you've got your own job role, you've got your own behaviors, you've got your own definition of success, but you are part of a team.
Yeah.
And it is a collective approach. And for me, that's what where culture really comes to life, is that the belonging part is belonging to the organization and where it's going, belonging to a great group of people, and people being happy where they work, feeling comfortable and feeling safe. If you can get measures in place that truly connect all of those things, then I would suggest that they are the real things that matter.
And I think you're right there. I think it's the relationships, isn't it? I mean, some of those, they're happening organically, isn't it? So by enjoying your environment and your work colleagues, that then you're happier and then everybody performs better. So it seems like a simple solution, but it is something that perhaps, like you say, having that definition, everybody's aligned. I think that definitely helps us on our way. So thank you for that.
And just to say, in terms of businesses, the reason I say it's unique to every business is because every business, its culture should be different. Yes. The point is, different industries will determine a different approach as well. So you have got to look outside and say, what are we about? What are we delivering? And therefore, if you're in the public sector versus you're in product sales, or you're in a SaaS business, logistics like yourselves, there's going to be nuances that therefore create a different type of culture, and therefore the definition will always be different. You've just got to make sure you define it for yourselves.
And that's it. And I suppose for me, then that means that then when you're working with customers, that makes it an exciting, relationship to build upon. You find a alignment with your partners, whilst there might be different, sort of like you say, their vision or whatever might be different. But fundamentally, I think you end up sort of working well with people that sort of align culturally as well. So really, really good example. Thank you. So how do you think cultural alignment impact employee engagement and productivity? And why do you think it's crucial for overall business success?
So I think there's a standout example in the UK. So Timpson's, if you live in the UK, you'll know, is a bit of a stalwart of a brand. So shoe repairs, key cutting. It's got one of the largest retail footprints in the UK, if not the biggest. And if you want to look at how it increases employee engagement, their employee retention is off the charts. And there's a reason. It's absolutely off the charts. There's case studies everywhere. But they were tested like everybody else during the pandemic in a way that their response wasn't just there for an opportunity to create a good PR representation of themselves. It's deep rooted in what they do. They, on a weekly basis, were making up up to 100% of the furlough itself. It was costing the organisation, through no other funding, £500,000 a week, and they committed to do that throughout. I know a similar approach was taken by Sims, and I spoke to colleagues within Sims who said how safe they felt. Rourke immediately said right off the bat, regardless of all of the nuances of furlough and who was going to get what, doesn't matter. Right from the beginning, this is who we are and this is what we stand for, and we will stand by that. Other examples during the same time, Wetherspoon's pubs. The owner came out and said that they would not pay out until they received the money from the government. And their response to people saying that wasn't right is, well, if people are short of money, I hear Tesco's are hiring. Versus Sports Direct, who tried to put a case forward that their work was essential workers. Their people were essential workers to open their stores and sell sports gear. Yet Timpson's stands by its people right from the beginning. And in turn, their retention rates are through the roof. They don't only do that. It isn't just about, as I said, a self-serving PR stunt. The company has an active scheme in recruiting ex-offenders, and they give everybody a day off for their birthday, a week off to get married. They have holiday accommodation around the country that they allow people to use. These things are deep-rooted. So there's an absolute link between the business that they work for and the people wanting to be there. I'm sure people that were treated badly by businesses are still there. My question would be, will they always be?
Yeah. And
also, if you look at the average hire, they believe in the UK, it costs an average of just over £30,000 to rehire. So if you lose someone, to recruit, to find them, train them, to get them productive within their role, so it takes a certain amount. They think about 18 weeks to get someone almost functioning within their role. They reckon there is almost an upfront cost that you won't see everywhere, but in people's time of over £30,000. Wow. So if you rehire 10 people a year, it's £300,000 in time and money and all of these different things, and therefore the measure is there. Timpson's doesn't have to pay that out as much because their retention is so high because of how they treat their people. There is a direct correlation in that organisation. There's a direct correlation in your organisation, Mel, between people staying and the place you create. Go on, sorry.
And no, well, I think you're right. I think, and by working with an organisation, like you say, those life events, I think that's really fundamental. I know that Rourke, whenever someone gets married or something, I mean, I invited Rourke to my wedding reception, and I'm pleased to say he came along with his wife, but it felt really special, and I think it's a bond we've got outside of the business, so I think that's a really sort of, like you say, it's more of a deep-rooted thing, but I didn't know that example of Timpson's, so off to go and have some keys cut now, I think.
And you speak to that, we just up the road from where we are, the gentleman that's run that 4 years, he's the happiest in his job that I see anybody in a retail. And I said, do you really love what you do? He said, I love my customers. That's why I'm here. It's so connected. Mid-30s. We're not talking someone that's been there in 50, 60 years and is that lifer. We're talking mid-30s, and he just genuinely loves coming to work every single day. It's because, yes, of his customers, but it's because he feels safe. Yeah. He feels connected to something. And James Timpson, who's the founder's son that now runs it, he actually did an apprenticeship and went around the stores. And every time he moved around the stores, they became the highest performing store within the chain. And he was like, why is it me that always does that? Well, it's because he could bring the supply chain manager, and because it was James Timpson, they would go, oh, right, let's get everything that he wanted. If he made a decision for a customer, which is, you've only got 20 quid, but it's going to cost you 25, don't worry, give me 20 quid, he'd do it. So when he implemented, became the CEO, he implemented a system of that freedom of choice. If it's right for our customer, make the right choice. If they did a thing around suit cleaning straight after the pandemic, where they offered free suit cleaning for anybody going for interviews. That's the type of thinking that they've got, and in turn, it empowers the people within the stores to feel like they're running their own businesses. I mean, that's amazing, and that's why they stay, because they're connected, going back right to the cultural alignment, to the purpose of what is a brilliant business.
And that's a really good example in the sense that customers feel connected as well. So if they feel that there's a business doing good, or that free service of having your suit cleaned, was something that people were going back out into the working world or whatever. That's quite a scary process, but they've alleviated some of those stresses or money worries, and that's a really sort of beneficial, great PR, but like you say, that's not obviously clearly why they've done it. It's part of their culture. So fantastic. No, I really love that. Like I say, I'll go and get some shoes mended or something.
Well, that's it. You will. You'll think about it next time and go, oh, I wonder where the Timpsons is.
Yeah.
Because people hear those examples, and I think we'll come on to it a little bit later, Mel. But I think we talk about it from an inside-out perspective in terms of how it impacts the employee and the colleague. But I think more than ever, actually, now it's starting to impact people's choices as to who they go with, and who they will spend their money with, because it is how they treat their employees is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your role at Revolve, what are some of the methods that you've used within companies that they can assess their current culture, and how can they identify areas that need improvement?
So we've done many different things, from supporting businesses to develop their vision and their purpose, so that people understand where they're going. But a lot of the work that we do now and it's similar to the project that we've recently done with yourselves, is around creating clarity of that how, and that's wrapped around defining what behaviours are within the business. All businesses will have values, and they're a great set of principles and things that we can connect with and represent outwardly for our business, from trust to bravery to curiosity. And those are things that we want to demonstrate every single day. But I truly believe that with the job role, you've got that sort of the numerical side of things. You've got the definition of what I need to do and what I need to deliver every single day. We work with businesses to create how everybody gets there. And we do that through creating culture-centered leadership. And that's where everybody throughout the organization understands wherever they are within the business, they are a leader. So whether you're a leader of organization, leader of people, or a leader of self, everybody's bound by that last example. We all lead ourselves. We all get out of bed every single morning. But when we get into work, there are things that we can all do in terms of setting great standards for ourselves, holding one another to account, being honest, being open, giving feedback. Feedback is not a line manager to a colleague. That's a colleague to a colleague. So adopting this golden thread that connects everybody, which is that we all, on some level, lead, take ownership, take accountability, and defining those behaviors. So against those different levels and throughout different levels throughout your business, you can create behaviors defined by whether it's a colleague level all the way up throughout the organization, and map those. It enables people to connect to something beyond just the output. So we talked earlier about input and output. The input is the behaviors. We need to be able to measure that. We need to be able to measure, because also what you can sometimes have, and this isn't in your organization, but often you will see it maybe in a sales environment. You can have someone that's top performer by a mile, but treats the people around them terribly.
Yeah.
But therefore, if you don't have a set of behaviors to hold them to account for, you've got no way of being able to say, look, your performance is great. That only makes up 50% of what we would define as performance throughout this business, exactly as Sims have done it. Your job role is only part of the story. Your behaviors and the way that you conduct yourself, they could be a top performer, but come into a meeting 10 minutes late every single time because they're the top performer and nobody can say anything. Well, they're not held to account for what is those behaviors. And there's always going to be a conflict then. Do we get rid of our top performer because their behaviors are bad? But can you really, hand on your heart, say that their behaviors aren't necessarily impacting the people around them? Yeah. Creating distrust, creating toxicity throughout the business. And therefore, what price can you put on the people around that one individual? And that's a negative example, of course. But what you can also have, the flip of that, is someone that is an absolute role model. They complete every behavior, but their performance is quite low. But you can still have a positive and developmental conversation that says, when it comes to loyalty, commitment, and behaviors, and kindness, and belonging to this business and committing to this business, we can't ask for any more. But there are areas in which we can develop your skills, that we need to develop your skills so that you find a bit of a balance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's almost like there's a template, isn't there? So there's a template, and kind of everybody knows where what's expected of them in their various roles, and I like the leader. So I wouldn't consider in my role, because I'm not in the leadership team, I don't manage other people, but like you say, taking responsibility to lead myself, and we do lead the team and other colleagues. So it empowers those that perhaps aren't in leadership roles to sort of step up and know that they're contributing. So for us, I think, well, for me certainly, that's made an impact, that behaviour does contribute to that, like you say, productivity and overall sort of culture of the business. So really good. So what are some of the key strategies that companies can use to achieve cultural alignment, and how do they go about implementing those strategies? So you've mentioned obviously the I lead myself template. Is there any others that we can?
Yeah. So you've got the definition of behaviours, but then you've got to look at there's a big piece around communication. So how the organisation sets itself up in terms of communication strategy, creating open, transparent communication throughout the business. Often you can find bottlenecks throughout the business, because what you will have is you'll have maybe in corporates, you'll have town halls, quarterly town halls, which are maybe the only opportunity for the senior business leaders to communicate with colleagues. But creating a strategy that talks about quarterly gatherings or quarterly get-togethers, to what's the weekly updates, to what are the sub communication strategies within the teams, everybody understanding that fundamentally communication is one of the biggest blockers to success. the further it comes down the line, the more it can be diluted. So being really clear on how people take information and communicate it out.
Yeah.
Because if it's misinterpreted, you can have people throughout your organization going in a direction that they think is right, but actually 3 months ago you set out a clear strategy that's been diluted. So how they do that will depend on size and scale. You can't have a one size fits all, but regular communication and lots of different types of communication is absolutely critical, because it keeps everybody aligned. Updates, information. Often there's a hesitance to give out information because it might create fear. There's a quarterly update on numbers is low, and therefore what that's going to create is paralysis because people are fearful for their jobs. Well, no, because if you create a great culture where people understand that they're connected to the overall purpose, but we're having a bad quarter, treat people like adults and tell them. Often there's a bit of smoke and mirrors created in business. It's made so difficult. So if it's anything, it is just communicate. And then if you think that you might be that you need to communicate again, then do. Yeah. Check, understand, engage through pulse surveys and satisfaction surveys. They've been around a long time, but again, satisfaction isn't just around, if you've created accountability through a culture-centric leadership model, if you've created a clear vision and purpose, if you've got defined job roles, if you've clearly said to people you're part of a team, then the questions you should therefore be asking should be really, really simple and people should understand. And it should be two-way. There's the way that you do that is asking people to, talk about how engaged they are, but asking them questions about what they're looking for and getting them to really commit in writing, as opposed to it just being numbers of a survey of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. Allow the communication to come the other way. So if you're going to create leader culture, top down, bottom up communication is critical. Removing the barriers through communication, I think, if I was to say one critical strategy, it's got to be that. Build in regular, frequent, fluid communication strategies. It will remove so much pain, so much ambiguity that's sometimes left, and allow for freedom, allow for belonging, because I get where we're going, and you're treating me in a way that is quite respectful. You're telling me the good, but you're telling me the bad as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you're right there. I mean, something that was introduced throughout the pandemic, obviously, for us, we were suddenly not in an office together. So that communication became really fundamental. And I know Rourke does a weekly update, which he calls a ARH update, but they are now a weekly thing, and we are years on now. And we know to expect that. That comes whether he's, abroad, on holiday, wherever it may be. We get a snippet of what the business is doing, generally lighthearted, and ultimately, I think weekend just gone by, it's going to be a hot one, make sure you've got your SPF and put a hat on. So there's right. That sort of, that it always comes back to the people, and sort of that you're working for an organisation that really cares. So they're generally a highlight of the week, that's for sure.
And that's it. Sometimes it's not always about the business. Yeah. Communication beyond the numbers, just as I said, around the behaviours is key. And then I think a big switch now, I know we talk about social events and social gatherings. It's not necessarily the desire for everybody. Yes. One of the things that I did with them, they said, look, we just can't seem to get everybody to our summer and Christmas events. And I said, well, change it up. Bring them in throughout the day so that there's a reason for them to be there. It's part of their role. We're going to have to do a company update, and then do something non-work based in the afternoon for those that would not necessarily come to the evening gathering because they want to be at home with their families. They don't really necessarily like going out sort of, drinking or anything like that, which isn't always the case, or whatever it may well be. But you get them there for the day, but you do something social in the afternoon. And for those that then want to do the evening bit, they can go off into the evening and enjoy that. And I'm actually doing that with that client this Wednesday. They've invited me along. But it means that everybody is part of a social, non-agenda driven sort of experience, but it's not sort of you're going to have to come to an evening do, which isn't always for everyone, you know?
Yeah. And I think you're right there. I think that's something that we try and adopt here at Sims. And I think we have, there almost had to be a reason for people to come back into the office. So it was like, what are we going to do? So we've done lunches and different things. But normally when we have our quarterly updates, there's some activity around that. I think we had everybody make pizzas. We had someone come in. And like you say, it gives even those that wouldn't necessarily choose to do a social event an opportunity to try something a little bit different, and you get a tasty pizza at the end of it.
You get some freelance.
Yeah, well, and let's face it, we can never grumble at that, can we? So what are some of the key challenges that companies may face when trying to achieve cultural alignment, and how can they overcome them?
I think it's about expectation right from the beginning. This is something, a lot of the things that you discuss here are intangible. They are kind of unmeasurable. It's a feeling that people feel, as I said, that feeling on a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. I think the biggest thing that I say always is patience. This isn't something that you're going to see a direct impact, and therefore it will take years. It's taken, I think, led by Rourke, there has always been that feeling of colleagues first. That's always been his biggest strategy. And therefore, it's been throughout the organization since it started. For other businesses, if they're looking to shift their culture, they have to be, they have to manage their own expectations, and also trust the process. You work with experts that know what they're doing, but also appreciate that this isn't going to be a bottom line, hit the bottom line immediately. If you've got high attrition, that will take years to change, because you're fundamentally going to have to work through the organization and get everybody collectively bought in. And also, it's about it's probably the hardest thing that you'll ever do, because therefore, with that patience means it's constant repetition. Yeah. And I'll give you an example in our business. Making decisions is something that I try and encourage people to do. I don't want all roads to lead to me. We're a micro business. We haven't got time for that, and I can sometimes go missing in terms of delivery and in client meetings for 3 whole days. I can't come back to then a list of things, and therefore we always encourage it. We've developed people, we've done training around it to allow people to make those decisions. But I remember a moment where we'd done some training, we'd had this really great meeting. Everybody was not only understood it, but we'd developed them. They felt empowered. There was so much energy in the room. And 6 weeks later, there was an example where something had got stuck, and in the process, in the decision-making loop, and I couldn't understand why. I sort of thought, I've given permission. What more can I do? And actually, what giving permission once and doing some training didn't necessarily mean that people wouldn't default back to some of the habits that they already had, which was, it feels safer for someone else to make this decision with me. And therefore, I guess my point is patience and repetition. Constantly repeating. Don't just do it once, maybe do it twice, run out of steam, not see the results. And that's what happens. I have worked in so many businesses where I hear the relaunching of their values, or they're putting out new values. And it's almost a loop, as opposed to assessing why didn't it work last time and what do we need to do differently. Yeah. And I have to say, of all the businesses that we work with, Sims is probably the best example I have of never, ever relenting on making sure people feel safe, making sure people feel engaged, making sure people have the resources, making sure that we keep it fresh. We're 10 years into a cycle of working together, and what we did 10 years ago around performance, we worked with you on that. Yeah. But it's evolved now. That what we did 10 years ago isn't relevant in the now, and therefore we've changed it. And I think sometimes there is a bit of a habit of, right, vision, purpose, done. Values, done. Now we're going to go another level down. Behaviors, fantastic. Leadership culture, great. 6 months later, look back. Why isn't everyone doing that? Well, because there is a responsibility that the business continues to check, continues to challenge, and challenge high. If people aren't being held to account for those behaviors, if you walk into a room or someone walks into a room 10 minutes late consistently and no one calls it out, I mean, what would you expect? That's the point, is everybody has a responsibility. Patience, repetition, asking questions, open questions to your employees. What do you want to do? Keep them involved and trust in the process, because it does work. There are examples all over the world of phenomenal cultures that mean that during a pandemic, they outperformed those that probably didn't have good cultures.
So can you just expand on that then? You said there's many examples. Maybe give us your top one or two that you...
My top one, and that sounds like it's the perfect timing, but it sounds like we'd practice that. My top one was something that I stumbled upon about 6 months ago. It's out there for everyone to see, but I was trying to think of a really relevant example around people's response to change. It was actually around change that I was designing a piece for a client. And I looked at our world. So training organization, everything was face to face. And 3 years on, we now have 3 film studios that we live broadcast all over the world. We in turn use, as we are now, Zoom, and we also use Teams, and we've used many other iterations. And one of the ones that we used in the very early stage was WebEx. And I remember thinking, where has WebEx gone? What has happened to WebEx? So at the start of the pandemic, WebEx had 25 years to prepare. Okay. Founded in 1995, one of the biggest organizations in the world so far ahead of anybody else in terms of they were the original online meet platform. So meeting platform, not meet as in MEAT. I had to clarify that because that sounded really strange.
Just in case.
Just in case. 25 years, this was their moment. You talk about you've trained off the pitch for however long. It's like, give me a situation where the whole world has to go along. I would be there, oh my God, all aside the actual effects of the pandemic, we are here to help people. Then you got Zoom. In October that year, so the pandemic was the March time, I can't remember the exact date.
Yeah.
October that year, Zoom had increased its share capital, what it was worth, by 822%.
Wow.
So its value had increased on the stock market by 822%. WebEx had decreased by 24%. Zoom was set up in 2011. WebEx, 1995. Many more years to prepare, 16 years more to prepare, ready for something like this, and it decreased by 24%. Do you know what's really interesting? Is one of the original founding employees, the first 20 employees, was a gentleman called Eric Wan. He left WebEx in 2011, and he started Zoom.
Oh, wow.
He was, at the time when he left, the vice president of engineering. And he left due to growing frustration that they wouldn't create or sign off at the board level an app-based communications platform. So he left and he built his own.
Wow.
And I think if you talk about those many examples of the way that people choose to think, and going back to your point around examples of where this has really come to life, Zoom had 0 failures in terms of capacity failures, even though it went from 5 million to 300 million users. How? Because he created a culture whereby they had been told to prepare for 200 times the volume. It was embedded throughout the organization. Yet WebEx, and there's so many examples. We know them in the UK. You've got a Blockbuster example, or some of those companies that WebEx weren't looking forward. And everybody became complacent and not ready. So if we talk about it in the concept of change, one organization fundamentally thrived because it had created an environment where people were preparing to be the best versions of themselves, not rest on their laurels, versus another company that have been around 16 years longer and their share capital decreased and their value decreased. So I think going back to the original question in terms of, where do we see it really have its biggest impact? There's an example, not just of people being happy, but people being connected to the purpose, people being connected to a way of thinking and working, being curious, always looking for ways to grow, always looking for ways to improve, ensuring that their systems are completely and utterly stress tested, versus one that went, we're all right, we're Webex, we're the biggest. And I'm sure there's lots more to it, but I'm telling you now, I know which one I would prefer to work in. It's the one that thinks forward, looks to the future, doesn't settle, always looking for ways to grow, to develop. And I think if to that point, that's a really important thing, is developing a culture that has a growth mindset, that if we talk about leadership, everybody is looking for ways to grow, to develop themselves individually and for business overall.
No, that's really interesting. I think, like you say, there wasn't a person that hadn't done some Zoom quiz during that time. So we were all on it.
Absolutely, we would have all been suffering. But I know, Webex was a bit clunky, and I'm sure they're making vast improvements. But we wouldn't have had some of those experiences, and the business outgrew anything in its marketplace at that time.
That's it, and it shows the power of connection, doesn't it? And keeping people wherever you are. I think that's the beauty of it, isn't it? So I suppose in terms of success metrics, I suppose they've often seen as a sort of a soft measure. So how do you quantify if culture is working or not?
Yeah, I mean, we've used some examples there where businesses have directly grown by creating a culture. For instance, Zoom, where they prepare for 150 to 200 times the capacity. So that's an example of alignment in terms of thinking, and therefore you can see a direct correlation. We talk about the softer ones, but retention of people is a critical one. We talked about the impact. In the UK, it's over £30,000 before somebody becomes probably truly productive within their role, and that's averaged out, of course. But a lot of that is in the time it takes them to get up to speed, learn the business. So there's another measure. You can also look at the scale of your headcount versus the growth of your organisation. The headcount within Sims has always been steady because everybody fills their roles to the fullest, but also they go beyond just the day job. They're always mucking in. I know that most people within Sims have a little sort of side thing that they'll be working on or be part of, or a couple, and it's about, and it seems easy in my sort of business sizes. We're smaller than Sims, but it seems easier because everybody can see one another. But again, aligned to the behaviors, if everybody truly gets what they do, they adopt a mindset of being a leader regardless, they role model those behaviors, then what you should see is that you're getting more out of the teams that you have. And I'm not talking about productivity. Productivity is a bit of a skewed measure because people try and measure productivity by bums on seats, time on logged in and bits and pieces. Again, often what tails off is business growth goes like this, but people, the amount of people that you bring in will never follow. So when that starts to tail off, you start to see difficulties within businesses. So you can see it in businesses where they're lean. I worked with a pharmaceutical company in Paris last year. Their turnover was over 400 million euros. They had 250 people in the business. It was just, every single person was a machine in so many ways. Not like, say again, sorry.
Above and beyond.
Honestly, above and beyond. My contact there headed up the talent, but also then took on communications and was supporting L&D as well. And it was the three roles in other organisations whereby you would probably cut them up and distribute them differently. Now, what I'm not saying is that everybody. The output of that is that business sold for last year for 1.8 billion. and it was the turnover was 400 million. You know, it was I think on its EBITDA, it was like an 18 times multiplier in terms of its sheer scale of its growth. That's how much the acquisition company wanted it. Again, therefore, you create lean, simple, clear ways of working, clear communication. Everybody was connected to the purpose. The results, therefore, outturn not in productivity, but in output.
Yeah.
Your output is higher because there's that peer-to-peer accountability. Everybody owns their job roles. They know what they're responsible for, but they also challenge and keep it clean. So there is so many measures down the line. But if you want to go down to the softer measures and go back to Timpson's, they ask one question of every colleague every year, and that is that on their annual survey, it's on a scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you with your area leader? That's the only thing that they ask.
Okay.
And they see that if they're happy with their area leader, then they're creating a great environment. I really enjoyed that one. We implemented the how do you feel on a Sunday night about coming to work on a Monday, and we asked people, and that's a really good measure too. Fun as well, I guess, a bit less corporate-y and standard.
But it is a good happiness is a good indication, isn't it? At the end of the day, so and it's hard to quantify but simple measure, I guess. So I suppose on recruitment then. So Sims, we've obviously said we've our retention rates are very good, but if we are to attract new people to the business. Do you feel that if in recruitment that a cultural fit is important and is it essential to that recruitment process?
Yeah, I do. It's a bit of a double-edged sword here, because what you don't want to do is necessarily turn away talent and subject matter experts, people that really get the role. But what you can do is you can explain. It's interesting with company values. Then your company values can't necessarily be someone else's values, but respecting them and being respectful of the fact that that's the organisation we are. Explaining clearly that whilst someone may be a little bit, let's say, if you've got a culture where, I mean, again, you go back to the point, Team Sims. You can't come in and be a single player. You've got to come in and you've got to be part of the team, and your contribution to that is measured. So yes, I believe it's really, really important, but I think it can be achieved with anybody.
Yeah.
Ultimately, unless somebody says, look, I'm coming in, I don't want to talk to people, I don't want to engage, I just want to come in, do my job, I'll make you loads of money in sales, and I just want to be left alone. Please don't make me go to social events. It's not for me. I don't even think that's about culture. Like, there will be environment. That's just environment. That's just kind of not how this business works. And therefore, you've got those standouts. Whereas done well and done with great storytelling and great engagement, there's no reason that anybody shouldn't buy into what you're doing and where you're going. Their role is only part of the story. And therefore, it's not about you musts. It's about, do you believe in this? Is this... Yeah. Does this sing true to you? This is a two-way decision, because this is the type of organisation that we are. This is what we believe in. This is what we stand for. This is how we treat one another. Is that the type of organisation that you want to work with? Because if it's not, no judgment passed. Yeah. But that's a decision. That's got to be part of your decision-making process in you choosing our organisation, is that's the kind of people that we are. And I think that's right for both parties.
Absolutely, I think that's it. That two-way street, isn't it? It's got to be right for both individual and business, and I suppose that's down to the onboarding process, isn't it? Really, that if you are starting, that there is that time to adjust and understand, and become or feel part of a team, and that's not something that just initially happens overnight. It does take time, and then obviously sessions, etc., with obviously organisations like Revolve to understand those, so that those behaviours, etc., that really help shape, I suppose, how somebody continues in an organisation. So that's really good. So probably getting close to wrapping up. But I suppose in your career you must have seen a variety of businesses transform. I know you've mentioned Zoom, but are there any others that stick out that have successfully achieved cultural alignment and seen the real business benefits of it?
You, Sims.
Me personally.
You were part of that journey. Forgive me, I've got the office line is completely ringing off, but I'm hopefully not picking it up too much. I'm not just saying this for those that are listening, but actually for the people that will be watching this will probably know Sims. And I would say that if you want to know how the Sims have done it, or you want to get some good ideas, speak to Claire, to Rourke. It isn't done because it has to be done. It's done because it's inherently part of the DNA of the organisation. It does start with Rourke. I enjoy every time I spend time in your business, because you said it at the start, you're part of the Sims family. You hear a walk in, and it's got all of the history that it's always had. And as the numbers have increased, that what it hasn't created is a difference in the way that people choose to think and be kind and treat one another. It is the best example, because I've been so involved with it, but also the pursuit. If you said to me what would be your advice, the business has never given up in terms of staying relevant for its colleagues, making sure its colleagues feel connected, making sure that there's development there, making sure that people feel connected, making sure that people feel part of the family, part of the team, all of those things, and keeping it fresh, and understanding that you have to keep investing. I think for the business that Sims is, it out invests. If you were to do a percentage, and I haven't done it in preparation for today because it probably wouldn't be appropriate, but the amount you invest in culture, people, engagement, happiness, I think outweighs, if you did it on a scaling system, most of the business that we work with. And therefore, there isn't a better example I can personally say that I've been connected to, but also directly seen the outputs of all of the measures, retention. We talked about business growth, output. We talked about output. What's one of the biggest things? You're all doing your role and a little bit more in every part of the business. So if you want to know, just keep looking at yourselves, because you are absolutely brilliant, and you're a pleasure to work with. And anybody that watches this, I would highly recommend that if you want to know how to, have a word with Claire and Rourke, and the great people in the business.
Amazing. Well, thank you. And we didn't pay you to say that. No,
you didn't.
But I think you're right. I think it's nice. I think our partnerships that we have, we all have our mug with our name on, don't we? And I know you've got yours in the cupboard, Luke. So when you come in and do our training, so hopefully that's felt. That's and actually a really proud factor. Obviously working for an organisation, but to hear that obviously a third party sort of say that you're working for a business that is to aspire to, I think that's a great credit. So thank you, really appreciate that. Well, thank you for today. It's been an utter pleasure. I've really enjoyed our discussion. So and if people want to access any more information about Revolve and your services, where should they go?
Everything's on our website, all of our contact details. So if they head to revolve-leadership.com, you'll be able to find out more about who we are, what we do, and most importantly, how we do it. But yeah, it's been a pleasure too. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this. yeah, it's been really good fun, Mel.
Amazing. Well, I look forward to seeing you when you're next down.
Can't wait. It shouldn't be too long. I think we'll be back in a couple of months.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mel. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.